Whether you're thinking about living off the land, off the grid, or just off the beaten path, West Virginia has a lot to offer. Especially if you're considering Hey, welcome. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Homesteading West Virginia, this semi-weekly web show where I share some of what I learn as a budding homesteader and local realtor here in the Mountain State. If that's something that interests you, please do yourself a favor and click subscribe right now. Great! And now you should also click the little bell that just magically appeared so that you get notified of new videos every time I upload. If you've been doing your research and you're ready to take that next step, start looking for your own slice of West Virginia countryside, check the description for my contact information. I'd love to help you on your journey to a more satisfying and fulfilling life right here in West Virginia. But most of you aren't there yet. So for now, let's just talk about the top 10 pros to living in West Virginia. Be sure to stay tuned all the way to the end for my number one reason. Coming in at number 10 is history. From controversial beginnings to exciting firsts. From stories of riches and stories of poverty, West Virginia is a wonderful place to teach hands-on history. There are many historic sites throughout the state that are well worth a visit. One of these, Organ Cave, is a beautiful natural cave that my husband and I visited on our honeymoon. Of note in this cave's history is that it was used during the Civil War by the Confederate Army. They mined 70 to 90% of the saltpeter that they needed to supply gunpowder for the army. They also found a way to refine it and have church all inside the cave. You're not a history buff, but you're still interested in West Virginia? Well, stick around for the next point. You should definitely want to hear about West Virginia's cost of living. West Virginia comes in roughly 20% below the national average for cost of living. The greatest factor for that is going to be housing, which we'll discuss in just a minute. But you can also expect to save about 5% on groceries, 15% on utilities, and 10% on transportation. I'm thinking about making a future video all about the cost of living. If that's something that would interest you, please let me know in the comments. But for now, let's just say, if your budget is a little tight elsewhere in the United States, you might have just enough to make it in West Virginia. Speaking of tight budgets, nowhere does a lack of funds become more obvious than when you're house shopping, especially if that hunting includes a desire to live off the land that comes with a house. In a lot of places where maybe you're considering going, the cost of land and housing is drastically more than in West Virginia. In fact, West Virginia ranks in the top 5 for most affordable places to find housing. We are 60% below the national average. That means a house that maybe costs $100,000 somewhere else could be bought in West Virginia for only $40,000. Now, this doesn't apply to everywhere in the state, and it's definitely changing as people flee the cities in search of more space. But on average, in West Virginia, we are 60% below the national average for housing cost, especially if you want more rural, remote acreage, and you're okay with the significant different distance between you and the nearest Walmart. Do you know what tends to come with rural acreage? Lots and lots of trees. At least it does in West Virginia. I don't know about everywhere else, but here we have plenty of timber. If natural resources is one of the things on your checklist that you need for being able to move, well, West Virginia can stay on your list for sure. We have plenty of rural acreage that is completely full of harvestable timber. Now, this has many benefits. The obvious one would be that you could sell the timber and recoup some of the cost of buying the land. This is not only beneficial because of the money, but it's also beneficial because the logging companies that come in will create clearings where they bring all of the wood to load up. They'll also bring a nice big bulldozer and make roads so that they can get access to where they need to go. This would leave behind nice clearings that you didn't have to create and bulldozed roads to gain greater access to more remote parts of your property. Another advantage to having timber on your land is that if your dream is to build a house with the wood from your own property, you can do that here. It's not easy and it definitely would take time, But if that's your dream, one thing's for sure. As long as you have the right tools to utilize what nature has given us, you'll never want for wood in West Virginia. Speaking of things nature has given us, the state of West Virginia is very well watered. With an average rainfall of 44 inches a year, West Virginia is more likely to leave you dripping than hanging when it comes to water. So, whatever you're trying to grow, be it tomatoes, palms, or tiny humans, there's always enough water to go around. I'm not saying we don't get a drought every now and then, but I think I've only seen 2 in my lifetime. Being that water is very vital to the survival of anything, why would you choose to live in a place that only has 15 inches of rain a year, or less, and they have to truck in water to keep things green and growing? I personally like knowing that I'm not going to be left high and dry. West Virginia won't leave you dry. It might just leave you high. No, not that kind. This kind. The state of West Virginia is the only state that's considered to be 100% within the boundaries of the Appalachian Mountains. That means that we have plenty of scenic overlooks and beautiful views to go around. In fact, the scene that you're seeing behind me is a picture that one of my good friends took of her own personal property. She does family photography and portraits. If you happen to already be in the area and you're interested in such a thing, you can check the link below. One of the biggest pros to me is West Virginia's beauty. It's one of my favorite parts of my job is that I get to take people a lot of times from out of state, and they come and they look at the properties and they fall instantly in love with the beauty of West Virginia. The best part for me is that I get to do it over and over again because it's not just one property that is gorgeous, it's everywhere. I mean, even Walmart here has a view. Now, if you're looking for a good time, there's plenty of that to go around in West Virginia too. Unfortunately, if your idea of a good time includes this, there's not much to offer you in West Virginia. But if it includes this, or this, or this, or this, or this, there's plenty to do in West Virginia. If you enjoy the outdoors, you'll never want for something fun, special, or creative to do while you're here. Hunting and fishing are very popular pastimes, as is hiking, rock climbing, boating, swimming, usually in something like this, ATV riding, horse trail riding. Even some consider farming a recreational pastime. My family and I, in our current stage of life, quite enjoy going to a local park. We tend to go up to the top of the hill and have a nice picnic lunch or dinner. Then we walk down the hill a little ways and let the kids play on the playground while my husband and I just sit, breathe the fresh mountain air, and dream about the day that maybe one day we'll have some property of our own. This park is actually in a fairly populated area, but it's very densely wooded and it makes you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. When I say fairly populated, I should probably quantify that. This particular park is in Fairmont, a huge town of 18,000 people, which to some of you probably sounds very small and refreshing, and that is why number 3 on our list is country life. You won't run into too many issues social distancing in the mountain state, because even our biggest cities in West Virginia are super small compared to most. Our largest towns are Charleston, Huntington, and Morgantown, all of which have under 50,000 people. And even with those cities, all you have to do is go about 10 or 15 minutes outside of town and you'll find beautiful places like this. This makes for very laid-back country living. You probably can hear bells ringing right now. That's because the small country town that I live in has a school that rings the bells with beautiful songs. Currently, they're playing Christmas carols. It's just one of the perks to living in a small town. So if you're tired of this, consider coming to West Virginia, where you'll find plenty of fresh air, beauty, and freedom. Freedom. What does that mean to you? Some would say that in America today, we are free. Some would beg to differ. All I know is growing your own food, collecting and using water on your own land, training your own children, and even generating your own power should be rights that cannot be messed with. Now, I understand on some small lots having restrictions on some livestock, and you'll find that even in West Virginia. But having rules against growing a garden, some states even seem to think they need to protect you from yourself. In West Virginia, however, we're free to grow a garden, train our own kids ourselves, and if you want to be part of the opt-out movement, you know, the one that's opting out of the grocery store, it's definitely possible in West Virginia. Even in our small quarter-acre in-town lot, my family is allowed to have a nice flock of laying hens and a small rabbitry. Plus, most of the land in West Virginia is rural, even remote. And on that land, there's very few restrictions. Finally, we've made it to the pinnacle of our list. The number one reason that I would consider West Virginia a wonderful place to live. The biggest pro to living in West Virginia, for me, and that is that West Virginia is full, and I use that term loosely because it's rural, but she's full of wonderful, kind, caring, loving people. The people in West Virginia aren't like you'll find anywhere else. Now, I'm not saying that everyone everywhere else is rude or unkind. Southern hospitality wouldn't be a thing if that were true. But the people in West Virginia are a breed all their own. They'll greet you with a hug, even if they don't know you. They might give you their last dollar or the shirt off their back if they think you need it more than they do. Anytime I think of the wonderful people in the state of West Virginia, I think of the time that my husband filled in for church in Gilmer County. We were greeted with hugs, not only from the little grandmas in the church, but also from a preteen little boy. It felt very similar to the greeting you'd give to an aunt or uncle you don't see very often. I'm not gonna lie, it was a bit awkward, especially since I grew up in a more populated area, and it's just not something that we did. But the more I've gotten out and about and around and explored my own state, the more I've realized that this kind of greeting is the norm. The people are super kind and sweet and nice. And if you want to come here and take advantage of people, we've been through that too many times, and you're not going to get very far. But if you want to come here and learn something and add something to a community and grow the life of your dream, the locals will come right alongside of you and help in any way they can. If you've enjoyed this video, please remember to give it a thumbs up. I'd love it if you'd subscribe and also click that bell icon. If you're ready to take the next step on your journey and you finally have all the information you need, check the description for my contact information. Give me a shout and we can see what we can do to get you headed in the right direction. And remember, whether you're looking to live off the land, off the grid, or just off the beaten path, there's definitely something for you in West Virginia. How is that thing still flying? This is not gonna work. Okay. It's gone. From controversy. There it is.
Just a minute, guys.
West Virginia is a loud place. I live on a busy street corner.
Can I be in the movie?
Utilities and 10% on transportation. Do you have something to tell people? This is my co-host. He refuses to go to bed. What? You need to say hi? Say hi, sleepy. Oh, I know. Oh, you're gonna get us. Oh, I love you. I love you. Oh, don't eat my mouth. Okay. Where were we? Oh, yes. You can save 5% on groceries. Wipe off the slobbers. I'm gonna call it done.